What happened to soldiers captured during Rome's countless wars? This is a question that has haunted historians and warriors alike for centuries. In an empire built on conquest, where legions marched from Hispania to Mesopotamia, prisoners of war were as common as fallen leaves in autumn. Were they slaughtered without mercy? Were they sold into slavery or forced into gladiatorial combat? Or did some find unexpected paths, even citizenship, within the very empire that had conquered them? To understand this complex issue, we must first look at how Rome treated those it defeated, not only as enemies, but as potential assets, threats, or bargaining chips. The fate of a prisoner in Roman warfare was far from uniform. It depended on many factors: who the enemy was, what the political climate demanded, and most importantly, what the general commanding the campaign desired. At one extreme lay execution. After major victories, entire enemy armies could be wiped out. Julius Caesar, during his Gallic Wars, described how he ordered the massacre of the Aerbates tribe after their failed rebellion. Men and women. This wasn't just cruelty, it was calculated deterrence. On the other end of the spectrum, some captives were integrated into Roman society. After the Punic Wars, thousands of Carthaginian prisoners were sold into slavery, fueling the economy of Italy. Others were forced to fight in the arena, becoming gladiators not by choice, but by chains. Yet surprisingly, some were recruited into the Roman military itself. During times of manpower shortage, even former barbarians were enlisted into auxiliary units. If they served long enough, they could earn Roman citizenship, a path once unthinkable for a man born outside the empire. So why such inconsistency? Because Rome was not a monolith. It was an evolving beast, pragmatic, opportunistic, and always looking for ways to maintain control over its vast dominions. To truly grasp Rome's treatment of prisoners, we must compare it with its enemies, the Gauls, the Germans, the Parthians, and others. Let's start with the Germanic tribes. They often practiced ritual sacrifice of high-ranking prisoners. For them, capturing an enemy leader and offering him to the gods, a brutal but spiritually significant act. There was no ransom, no enslavement, just death under the sacred oak. The Celts, too, took heads as trophies. Capturing a nobleman might mean keeping him alive temporarily to parade in victory, then sacrificing him later. But they also valued strength, so strong warriors might be spared and given a place among the tribe. Now, contrast this with Rome. Even at its cruelest, Rome rarely killed en masse unless it served a purpose. The Romans saw value in life, especially if that life could work, fight, or die for entertainment. Parthia, Rome's greatest eastern rival, also took prisoners, but often used them as political tools. Roman legionaries captured during Crassus' disastrous campaign in Carrhae were sent east, some ending up in China as mercenaries. Unlike Rome, which often absorbed its captives, Parthia tended to displace them, using them more as symbols of victory and as useful assets. So, was Rome more humane? Not necessarily, but it was more systematic. While others acted on impulse or tradition, Rome calculated every move, including what to do with the broken bodies left on the battlefield. One of the most enduring images of Roman prisoners is that of the chained soldier being led into the slave markets of Capua or Pompeii. Indeed, war was Rome's largest source of slaves. Every major campaign brought back tens of thousands of captives. Sulla's campaigns in Greece, Caesar's in Gaul, Trajan's against Dacia, all flooded the empire with new slaves. But not all captives became field hands or household servants. Some were trained as skilled laborers, builders, scribes, even tutors for the children of patricians. And yes, some were forced into the arena. These were known as noxi, criminals or prisoners condemned to fight until death. Their fate was grim, but even here, there were exceptions. Some won fame and freedom through skill and luck. Slavery was not always a life sentence. Many prisoners eventually earned their freedom, becoming freedmen, and sometimes even wealthy citizens. Rome's social mobility, though limited, allowed for such transformations. So while captivity often began in blood and despair, it could lead to survival, and occasionally, success. So, what happened to prisoners of war in the Roman Empire? The answer depends on time, place, and politics. Some were executed, swiftly or slowly, as warnings to others. Others were enslaved, working fields, mines, or households. Some were paraded in triumphs, displayed like trophies before being quietly sold off. And a few, the lucky or the strong, were drafted into the legions or fought in the Colosseum, earning fame, fortune, or freedom. Rome did not treat all prisoners equally. It treated them strategically. Unlike many ancient cultures, Rome saw opportunity in defeat. Where others saw only corpses, Rome saw laborers, soldiers, and future citizens. In short, the fate of a prisoner of war in Rome was never written in stone. It was carved by the hand of necessity, ambition, and power. The mere possibility of being captured played a crucial role in Rome's psychological warfare. For Roman soldiers, capture was considered one of the greatest traumas. A legionary who surrendered or fled could expect harsh punishment, sometimes execution by his own comrades. The Roman military code valued discipline and bravery above all else. To be taken alive was seen as a failure not only of duty but of honor. But for Rome's enemies, the threat of capture was a tool of terror. Generals like Julius Caesar understood that spreading fear of enslavement or death could break enemy morale before battle even began. When Caesar besieged Alesia, he made sure that the surrounding Gallic tribes knew what awaited them if they resisted. His legions were efficient, ruthless, and merciless to those who refused to surrender. This strategy worked. Many tribes either defected or avoided confrontation altogether. Even during peace negotiations, the specter of captivity loomed large. Surrendering often meant being dragged in chains through the streets of Rome in a triumphal procession, a living symbol of Rome's might. For some leaders, like Vercingetorix, it ended with public execution after years of imprisonment. So while Rome's treatment of prisoners varied, its use of captivity as a weapon of intimidation was consistent and calculated. Prisoners of war were not only assets in terms of labor, they were also valuable political tools. Rome often exchanged high-ranking captives for Roman citizens held by foreign powers. During conflicts with Parthia, such exchanges were common. In some cases, entire diplomatic missions revolved around retrieving Roman prisoners, especially those captured during embarrassing defeats like Carrhae or Adrianople. Captured kings or generals were paraded in triumphs, not just for spectacle, but as propaganda. These events reinforced the idea of Rome's invincibility. The defeated leader, once proud and feared, now walked in chains before the emperor and the roaring crowd. Sometimes, these prisoners were kept alive for years. Vercingetorix was imprisoned for 5 years before finally being executed. Others disappeared into dungeons, forgotten by history. In contrast, some were surprisingly well treated. Cleopatra Selene, daughter of Cleopatra VII and Mark Antony, was raised in the household of Octavio, Augusta's sister, and eventually married a client king. Her fate shows that Rome could show mercy, but only when it served imperial interests. So while prisoners were often symbols of Rome's dominance, they could also serve as bargaining chips, hostages, or even future allies. One of the defining traits of Rome was its ability to absorb rather than destroy. Unlike the Assyrians, who deported entire populations to erase cultural identity, Rome often allowed conquered peoples to maintain their customs, at least initially. But this policy extended only so far when it came to prisoners of war. Those deemed useful, skilled workers, strong fighters, or educated individuals had a better chance of survival. Others, especially those from rebellious provinces, faced harsh treatment. In times of rebellion, mass executions were not uncommon. Spartacus' revolt saw 6,000 rebels crucified along the Appian Way. This was not just punishment, it was a message. But when Rome needed manpower, former enemies were welcomed into the ranks. By the 3rd century, entire legions were composed of non-citizens. The Roman army became a melting pot of cultures where a man from Britannia could fight alongside someone from Syria or Dacia. Citizenship, once a privilege, became a reward, offered to soldiers after 25 years of service. This system allowed Rome to replenish its forces while keeping conquered peoples loyal. Thus, the line between prisoner and citizen was thinner than one might think. So, what happened to prisoners of war in the Roman Empire? The answer is not simple, because Rome itself was not simple. It was an empire of contradictions, cruel yet calculating, brutal yet pragmatic, rigid yet adaptable. Some prisoners were slaughtered without mercy. Others were enslaved, forced to work until death claimed them. Some fought in the arena, dying for the amusement of the masses. And a few, the lucky, the strong, or the useful, rose from chains to citizenship. Rome did not follow a single policy. It acted based on need, opportunity, and power. Its enemies feared captivity, not just for what it meant physically, but for the loss of identity, freedom, and dignity it brought. But in the end, Rome showed that even in the darkest corners of war, there was room for survival, and sometimes redemption. Because in Rome, nothing was ever set in stone, only written in blood, sweat, and ambition.